Littcrit began its journey in 1975, and the original name was Onlooker. The journal officially became Littcrit in 1976 and has completed 50 years and 100 issues. Dr. P.K. Rajan was working at Sri Paramakalyani College in Tengashi district of Tamil Nadu when he decided to begin Littcrit. Many literary luminaries have played a seminal role in cementing Littcrit's reputation as a highly respected and internationally acclaimed literary journal. Over the years, Littcrit has played an important role in providing a platform for serious academic intervention at crucial moments. Dr. P.K. Rajan's timely editorial interventions reminded serious readers and critics that Indian English literature and criticism were at a critical juncture and needed to focus on new areas of literary studies. Quoting from Dr. P.P. Ajay Kumar's recollection of Littcrit's remarkable journey titled 50 Years, 100 Issues, the journal has shaped debates on literary criticism, comparative literature, and Indian aesthetics. Eminent writers, scholars, critics, thinkers, and activists have contributed to Littcrit, and it has always respected diversity, inclusivity, dissent, and academic scholarship. Dr. P.K. Rajan's tragic death in January 2006 did not lead to the closure of his brave and beloved endeavor. The editorial board, comprising of Dr. P.P. Ajay Kumar, Dr. Kalyani Ballat, Dr. Thomas Kuruvilla, Joyce Rajan, Deepthi Rajan, P. Vijay Kumar, K. Gopalakrishnan, and Khairunisa A. resolved to chart the future course of Littcrit. With the June 2007 issue, Dr. P.P. Ajay Kumar assumed the mantle of the editor of Littcrit and has steered the course of the journal since then. Littcrit continues its remarkable journey 50 years after it was established under the visionary leadership of Dr. P.P. Ajay Kumar, Chief Editor and Professor Emeritus, Institute of English, University of Kerala. Littcrit has remained a dynamic survivor by consistently evolving and adapting to the demands of changing times. The Golden Jubilee celebrations of Littcrit began last year with the Literary Carnival at Government Arts College, Trivandrum, and further programs were conducted at various institutions across India. Dear friends and well-wishers of Littcrit, we have gathered here today for the release of the 100th issue of Littcrit. I invite Professor E.V. Ramakrishnan, Professor Uday Kumar, and Professor Ajay Kumar onto the dais. Let me begin my duty by inviting Dr. Lal C.A., Professor, Head of the Institute of English and Associate Editor of Littcrit, to deliver the welcome address.
Very warm good morning, virtually and otherwise, to all academicians, all our students. It's a most happy occasion to be here. The last time we seriously met on an academic event associated with Littcrit, other than the frequent annual lectures, was in 2013, December, when we had the release of the 75th issue. That is quite something. It feels like very recent and more than a decade has passed. And that time we had a grand inauguration here. We celebrated the 75th issue with a seminar, a conference, which happened in IAC. And the inaugural day was here. Now we have 125 issues, and also another academic event jointly organized by the Institute of Education and Littcrit. We have two major things happening today. One is the release of the one presentation, and the other is the panel discussion, which we are all looking forward to, which is also going to be a major event today. So I would like to thank Dr. Deepa for the very substantial introduction to Littcrit. And so I would not want to waste much time on talking more about that. Those take my responsibility of welcoming this August gathering. In the sequence of the events here, let me most warmly welcome Dr. Ajay I'm talking about this also. And again, I would like to say that I'm standing here not just as a teacher in the Institute of English, but also as part of the Littcrit team. Though my contribution is not as such as I want to, but Sir has kindly included me in the team, and we have been working together for the last several years. So, so today, soon after, we have a couple of people talking about it. One will be Dr. Ian Prakash. Sir is here. Sir was here last in the 13th. I remember that in the audacity of my youth, if I was a youth at that time, in 2013, I gave Sir a gift and Sir was talking. I was furious, but I felt very bad about it. But later, Sir very graciously, pardoned me for that audacity. So very happy to see that. And later on, I had several occasions. No slips, sir, no slips. That time we had many speakers. Sorry, but I always warmly remember, sir, because of that incident and the later friendship. So warmly welcome you to the gathering. Sir was and worked in many colleges in Kerala, and he was a close friend of Dr. P.K. Rajan, the founder editor of Littcrit. The next person who will be talking spoke the release of the series, Dr. P. Again, sir, doesn't need a introduction. Thank you, sir, for the gracious acceptance of our invitation. The 100 will be released by the Masar again, it's a well-known person. I don't want to talk much of him, but still, there will be. Sir is professor at the Center for English Studies in. Will also be part of the panel discussion soon after the release. In the release function, the copy will be received by Dr. Evening Ramakrishnan. Sir is a well-known bilingual writer, quite literary critic, sir. Especially, I would say, our own. And sir has already is familiar with the community also because I did that. He can memorial actually a couple of years, but warm welcome. I don't know if warm welcome. Yeah. And also we have with us Professor Jamila Ding. She is also one of the panelists. So Professor Jamila is formerly, for the young people here, she was formerly the head of the Department of English. She was also the director of the Center for Canadian Studies for long. And more than that, she is the research supervisor of Dr. Jema, Dr. Sharon, Dr. Mina, and he is also my teacher. So very sincere and welcome. Hundreds of occasions we have been called leading conferences, being part of we have Dr. P.K. Rajan's son, Mr. Binu Rajan. We have with us many eminent professors. Professor Gopalakrishnan is here. And Sajib Rose is here. K.T. Radhakrishnan is here. And Karik Singh is here. We have Professor Krishna, many other teachers and scholars. So a warm welcome to all of you. And I should not forget the Littcrit team, Dr. Kalyan, one of the associate editors and one of the leading forces behind it. And I remember 2013 conference, humor conference, the discussion we had, and the idea of inviting I also it became a screaming success. He, I also was a Jew who wrote about humor in the concentration camp. It became a very marked event in academic days. Also, Dr. Sanjita, Dr. Sutta, both of them are professors in Kerala Government Service. Dr. Sutta retired recently, Sanjita very actively in service. Again, very active editor, board members, and Dr. Deepa Nair, we have already listened to, and my colleagues, Lakshmi, and Sudhir, and all our research scholars, students, a warm welcome to you all of you, and thank you for coming. And let me, before conclude, I need to welcome two individuals, Godfrey Das and Dia. Godfrey Das is again a known person. He has been designing the Littcrit cover and the whole and getting it printed for so many years now. He's an integral part of the team. We'll be honoring him later. And also, Sri Zira, he provides media assistance and maintains the website of the Littcrit. He's proud of the world. Yeah, I'd like to welcome. So I hope I have not left anybody else. So a warm welcome to all of you. And my respect also to all.
Lal sir, thank you for that very genial and warm welcome extended to everyone assembled here. Now I invite Dr. P.P. Ajay Kumar, the guiding force of Littcrit. Sir's dedication and commitment have ensured that Littcrit stands the test of time. I cordially welcome Dr. Ajay Kumar to deliver the presidential address.
Respected guests, Professor Uday Kumar, Professor D.V. Ramakrishnan, Dr. Jamila Begum, Professor P. N. Prakash, Dr. B. Hariharan, Dr. Meenakshi Pillai, Dr. Sujapura, and Lakshmi Priya and Lakshmi Suma, and editorial board members of Littcrit, including Kalyani and Chitra, Sanjita, Deepa, and Lal, and our the friends of Littcrit, very old friends have come. That is Krishna, Professor Krishna Kumar, Hari Krishna, and K.G. Radhakrishnan, and Sajiv Rose, and Gopalakrishnan sir, Sudeep, Siyaul Haq. I think this is an occasion for the meeting of friends of Littcrit. We have started the celebration of the 50 years of Littcrit last year, 2025, with a carnival, which was held at Government Arts College. And we have been organizing programs at different institutions all over India, from Jadavpur University to Tirunelveli, a college in Tirunelveli, and in different parts of Kerala, Madras University as well. So this is, I think, the culmination of the whole celebration. that is Golden Jubilee celebration of Littcrit, and that is being culminated with the release of the 100th issue of Littcrit. So it is with immense pride and deep satisfaction that we gather here today to celebrate a truly remarkable milestone, the completion of 50 years of continuous publication and the release of the 100th issue of Littcrit. This is not merely an occasion of celebration, but one of reflection, gratitude, and renewed commitment. The journey of Littcrit is in many ways extraordinary. In an academic world often sustained by institutional backing and financial support, this journal has carved out its own path, growing, evolving, and enduring without the sustained patronage of major institutions or funding agencies. Its survival and success, therefore, stand as a testament to perseverance, conviction, and collective goodwill. Over the years, Littcrit has faced its share of challenges. Sustaining intellectual rigor and editorial integrity without consistent resources is no easy task. Yet, through all these trials, the journal has been strengthened by the unwavering encouragement of well-wishers, scholars, and loyal subscribers who believed in us and our mission. Their faith has enabled Littcrit to consistently produce issues that engage meaningfully with pressing literary and cultural debates. From its very inception, Littcrit has remained deeply responsive to contemporary concerns, questions that challenge established modes of thought and provoke critical inquiry. Across 5 decades, the journal has hosted a wide spectrum of discussions ranging from Indian writing in English to Australian studies and from globalization to spatial dimensions of culture. This diversity reflects not only its intellectual openness, but also its commitment to staying relevant in a constantly changing world. A particularly notable feature of its journey has been the publication of 25 special issues. These thematic volumes, enriched by contributions from scholars across the globe, stand as markers of the journal's responsiveness to emerging debates, whether addressing topics such as Dalit discourse, indigenous studies, space and culture, ideas, Marxism, environmental crisis, like the Australian bushfires. Each issue has engaged deeply with the concerns of its time. The strength of literature lies not only in its themes, but also in its people. It has brought together distinguished writers and critics alongside younger scholars entering the field, creating a vibrant intellectual community. I don't have to mention the names of the eminent scholars and writers, beginning from Frederick Jameson, Terry Gilton, Mulraj Anand, M.K. Naik, and many others. The list is very long. The journal's evolution is also visible in its changing design and format, from crowd size to dummy and back again, along with the incorporation of modern features such as inclusion of abstracts, keywords, etc. Efforts towards digitization and the introduction of an online version signal its readiness to embrace the future. Behind this enduring venture stand many dedicated individuals, At its core was the vision and foresight of Dr. P.K. Rajan, whose initiative laid the foundation for Littcrit. His work was strengthened by the steadfast support of his colleagues and the academic community around him. In fact, the journal was started when Dr. Rajan was working at Paramakalyani College near Tirunelveli. And most of the editorial board members were his colleagues in the college as well as in the nearby colleges. But even though it was started when he was in Tamil Nadu, the printing of the journal was conducted in Trivandrum itself, at Peta. And when he came to University of Kerala at the Institute of Distance Education, it's continued its publication from Trivandrum. It's equally invaluable has been the contribution of Joyce Rajan, whose dedication and encouragement have sustained the journal across the years. She was also the associate editor of Littcrit for some time. The memory of D.T. Rajan, who was an active member of the editorial board, remains deeply cherished. The journal has also been supported by numerous scholars, contributors, guest editors, and well-wishers, whose intellectual and material assistance made this journey possible. The contribution of printers and designers working tirelessly behind the scenes has ensured the physical life and dissemination of each issue. As we celebrate this golden jubilee and the 100th issue, we must recognize that this milestone is both an achievement and a responsibility. It inspires us to look back with pride, but also to look ahead with determination. The world of literary and cultural studies continues to evolve, and so must Littcrit. Many people ask me one question: why Littcrit? Because it is an old-fashioned name. Because literary criticism is no more in existence, and I think culture studies has taken over, and many area studies have taken over the place of literary criticism. That is true, but I think the name stands for, it has a historical importance, even though at present it does not stand for mere literary criticism. We find that the name has having a historical importance should continue. But the journal has transformed itself, and it has incorporated all leading and mainstream ideas and ideologies into its fold, and it is certainly a platform for discussion of emerging trends in contemporary literary and cultural work. In the years to come, the journal will continue to ask difficult questions, challenge established frameworks, and contribute meaningfully to intellectual discourse. With the sustained efforts of the editorial and advisory boards and the continued support of its readers and contributors, Littcrit will undoubtedly carry forward its legacy of inquiry, resilience, and excellence. I would like to use this opportunity to thank all those who helped us, contributed to Littcrit from the beginning till now. And as I told you before, many special issues were published. Altogether, 25 special issues were published. Some of the special issues were guest edited by eminent scholars. Dr. Jamila Begum guest edited one issue on Canadian studies, and Dr. Debasri Dattoroy guest edited an issue on indigenous studies, and Dr. Sujapur and Chitra, we are guest edited an issue on Canadian bushfires, sorry, Australian bushfires. So we find a lot of people associating with us and helping us and contributing articles. I think almost all scholars, all important scholars all over India and outside India has contributed, almost all means, most of the important eminent scholars have contributed to Littcrit. Dr. Shashi Tharoor, Geeta Hariharan, and many other writers also contributed to Littcrit. So it is certainly a long journey and a fruitful journey, and we believe that this journey will continue unabatedly in future as well. So I thank you all for your support. Professor K.V. Ramakrishnan has contributed to Littcrit from the beginning. He has a very, I think, long association with Littcrit. And Professor Uday Umar, even though I tried to get his article, I never got an opportunity. He delivered a memorial lecture, and he has been supporting us all along, but he is yet to publish in Littcrit. Dr. Meena Pipalli conducted an interview with Jonathan Dolimo, and that was published in Littcrit. Hariharan also published interviews and articles in Littcrit. So it is certainly very worthwhile, and that means a glorious journey. And we find that the emerging scholars also are contributing in large numbers. In fact, we have a mix of established scholars and emerging scholars. A lot of scholars from different parts of India contribute to Littcrit now, even now, and we hope that Littcrit will grow and it will transform itself and it will live up to the expectations of literary enthusiasts. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for giving us an inside view of the remarkable journey of Littcrit. I welcome Professor P.N. Prakash, Professor of English and a close associate of Dr. P.K. Rajan, to offer his felicitations.
Dr. P.P. Rajan, distinguished professors, honorary students, my dear friends, as the chairman and the anchor, as they have told you, we have assembled here to celebrate a great event. The issue of the centenary issue of Littcrit. I describe this event, this one, this is the release of this centenary issue, a great event, because it's fantastic, my dear friends, to see a critical journal survive for over 50 years. It is not simply that the journal has survived. More importantly, it has survived with dignity. A journal that is respected, not in our state alone, but almost throughout India. And these 50 years, we have seen the sunrise and sunset of many other ambitious literary journals. I myself am a witness to that. We should have a really very nice academic journal. But they haven't. And why is it that literature has survived? Obviously, the credit goes to first and foremost to Dr. P.K. Rajan during the first till the 60th or 61st issue. Yes. And in equal measure to Dr. P.P. Ajay Kumar after that. I wish I had a bouquet of red roses to hand over to Ian. And to the team in particular, because they have done a great job. And every time, as all the speakers, and others, as they have been telling you, we cannot separate any mention of Littcrit without remembering Dr. P. We used to be very close. We grew up together. And then, I'll be brief. I remember Dr. Rajan coming to the house I was living in Dharmadam many years ago in 1973. And then he stayed nearly 10 days with me because we were young. And then he was obsessed with two things in those days. One, he was spearheading a strike in Tamil Nadu to ensure direct payment to the college and university teachers in Tamil Nadu. That was one. And the second, he was constantly telling me we should have a journal of our own, a journal that people would sit down and that would express the responses of Indians. Because the academic community in those days, there was a contradiction. On the surface, they kept on saying that in the age of post-colonialism, we are against the British. But almost all of them were eager to get published in the UK. So this contradiction must change because we have something genuine to say. We have something, we should create a corpus, a body of critical literature that we can boldly say, this is ours and we are proud of it. And it was this conviction, rather, you may even call it a vision, that prompted Dr. P.P. Rajan to bring out, to start a magazine. Then one fine morning, he sent me in postcards. There's going to be a release of the first issue. Please come if you have the time. I went there and I had to discover the hotel where it was being held. Such a modest, such a very minor function. Because, and I can tell you that I have forgotten even who released it. But Rajan, throughout the discussion, he kept on telling me that he was greatly indebted to three great scholars. Number one, Dr. Srinivas Iyer. Number two, our Dr. Ayyappa Padikar. And number three, perhaps the greatest support for him came from Mulkaraj Anand, who treated him like a son. They said, when several people suggested that, why don't we publish creative poetry, short stories? It was Dr. Srinivas Iyer who put his foot down and said, only critical. That is what's going on. And as all of us know today, when we look back, Dr. Rajan's vision was perfect. It was his, the tenacity with which he pursued his objective, the commitment, the dedication, uncompromising dedication. Though this gentle colossus gave, you might wonder, can we use the words like colossus when we refer to ordinary mortals like this? Colossus is a term. You make it relative and say that in the history of Littcrit, the word colossus does he deserves to be called a colossus. It was his dedication and uncompromisingly he stayed close to certain statements. when everybody said, why are you not a leftist, a political, why is it that your magazine is a political? He kept on saying that. First, let us define. I was present in one of those gatherings. What is politics? Are you speaking to George Orwell's that almost everything, every writing is political, is there? And he said, in my mind, I have no doubt that this magazine should be primarily literary. It is not a bunch of political pamphlets tied together. This is going to be a something. It's going to be the response of Indian academics on what they feel, what they think about literature. It was long before the tsunami of literary theory hit the Indian academic shores, and so beautifully it proceeded. And then, okay, poor Raji, he died in a tragic accident. And never before have I seen a transition so smooth, like moving from Rajan to Ajay. I can boldly say that because I have no accident. Because he has been doing a wonderful job. He changed the format, keeping the content in the way it should always be. Always. But like black and white becoming color photos, Ajay Kumar introduced the color into that with paintings. And suddenly, like a fountain coming to life on a dark night, Littcrit became colorful. And it had some more, and I conducted the team also. So many of them have contributed. I would never underestimate the contribution of any of them. But one thing, even to my friends, I tell them, when I go to seminars, when I meet my friends, when I go to a college, I tell them, why don't you subscribe to Littcrit? Because of their love for media. What is its politics again? I come back to that. I said, if there's a special number on Dalit writings, that's its politics. If there's a special number on master studies, that's its politics. If there's a special number on feminist studies, that's its politics. You decide what its politics is. But this doesn't mean that it should go, the contents of Littcrit should go unexamined. At the heart of it, I believe, whatever it be, it must relate to the marginalized, the underprivileged, the suffering classes of India. I do not mean mere lip service. I mean, unless it is able to, otherwise, it becomes a sort of intellectual masturbation where you are happy, you have said something fantastic about the latest theories in literary studies and other studies. No, that's not it. And we can contribute as readers that this is the way we would like Littcrit to continue. I'm sure that there's an excellent team, a learned team, a research-oriented team working together with hand in hand with Dr. P.P. Ajay Kumar, and there's a bright future. Every time at the 50th, on the first, at the release of the first issue in Madurai, I was there. On the release of the 50th, like a comet, I said, and at the release of the 75th, I was there. And at the 70th also, and I assure you, I will be here at the 120th. myself. History, but I've been failing in my duty on this occasion if I do not make a mention of uh, a member of the Littcrit's editorial team. I'm referring to D.P. Rajan's daughter. As we say, she was the sweetest thing that ever grew beside a human being. Remembering that, and when I'm alone, sometimes my eyes brim over with tears, but they stream down only when I think of that child. She grew up in my arms along with my son. And if there is one occasion when I should say, I am happy that it is not there anymore, that is when I think of see. She was also a part of the. I make a mention of it because Deepthi was a member of the editorial board. West Bengal Task Force used to making a mention of so that when we think of Radha, when we think of those who contributed to the making of Littcrit and then making it an intellectually constantly appealing magazine, several people have contributed. Deepthi also has contributed. I have seen her putting stamps on the envelope and sending her to the post office. Go post it. And so let Littcrit, I'm repeating it, I know. And the heart of Littcrit, let it not be a simple passion for debates. Let it not simply be, after all these, I was at 2005, Blackwell production of literary theory and anthology. Please don't call me a very narrow-minded person. I was meticulously referring to the theories there. It's the most about Littcrit must be able to. We don't want a repeat of anthology as Neil identified to. But we can bring out our own responses and we can be proud of it. And it is because humanity is at the heart of all literary discussions in our country that it becomes meaningful. And that also accounts for the topic we have chosen today for panel discussion. Crisis of humanity. Thank you very much. And Dr. Lal, you need to have been so apologetic. It is my habit to suddenly get angry and forget. Thank you very much. Thank you, my dear friends.
Thank you, sir, for that very warm and personal felicitations. Now it is my duty to welcome Dr. B. Harikaran, Senior Professor of English and former head, Institute of English, to extend his felicitations.
Good morning, everyone. Professor Ajay Kumar, Professor Viram, Dev Kumar, very senior colleagues, my teacher, my colleagues, friends, students. I'm truly overwhelmed standing here. I was listening very keenly to Dr. Lal, Dr. Ajay, and Dr. Prakash. And it was almost like receiving once in 6 months Littcrit. And every time I see a new issue of Littcrit, I don't know, for some strange reason, I get to see in my mind. I don't know why. Maybe it is, maybe I become emotional, but there is something, there is a very strange way in which the memory of the man is visible in every issue of the journal. I don't know why that happens. I've not associated myself with the journal in any way, but I must say that I was extremely fortunate to be published in the journal. It was a dream. I never thought that I would ever be published in. I don't know why I had that thought in my mind as a young researcher, but it was very much there in me, and I must say that I was really fortunate to interact with Professor Rajan when I was a research scholar here, when we had this big international conference on Canadian studies here. He was one of those speakers who had a keynote address. I still remember that. And when he became vice chancellor, a couple of times at least, I had the opportunity to interact with him. That was it. And then, of course, he was very much part of the Institute of British. He came to the department, and of course, we lost him. But I think he is somewhere on this campus, and perhaps that is why this event, 100th issue, is released or is being released in the University of Kerala, in the very Senate chamber, where I'm sure he had many things to say as a sitting member. This is perhaps the association that the Institute of British has with Littcrit. And I'm really, really fortunate that I'm part of the Institute of British and in a strange way associate myself with the release of this issue. I don't know if I'm being very emotional, but I don't think I'm that kind of emotional person, but this is truly overwhelming. I think that this is overwhelming because of the foundation that this journal has. I don't have to remind all of us the fate of many journals, the difficulties, the challenges that they have. But the kind of foundation that this journal has is something very unique. Perhaps it's a cliche to say that it has grown from strength to strength. I don't want to say that. But I think every time you look at this journal, you kind of think about the foundation on which it is built. And perhaps this is what Dr. Ajay Kumar was referring to when he talked about the title, the name of the journal. I think it has an extra bone if you look at it. There are 8 letters, but there's an extra bone there. I think that's what props it up, and that I think is the foundation. I don't think it is literary criticism all the way. I think that's what really has made this journal not exactly survive, but do a lot more for the academic community not just here, but also outside India. When I look at Littcrit, I very often try to compare the founding moments of Littcrit with another journal, which is familiar to me. I've not seen this journal for a very long time, which was founded by none other than Sridhar Subbai. You know, the journal, Littcrit. And I don't know where that journal is now. I think it is being published, but the kind of visibility that Littcrit has, I don't think is there for the criteria now. I'm not saying that it never had that visibility. It had great visibility because I know that because when I started my research, I wanted to look at what literary criterion was doing to scholarship and the academia in India. Professor Begum would remember that. That was the first project that I thought I'd be doing as an English scholar. But it has never crossed my mind to really do something like that with Littcrit. This is a thought that I have. I remember having a student working with me on Indian literature to look at what this journal was doing to the study of Indian literature and what it does to Indian academia and, for example, how the Northeast, for example, gets represented in this journal. But literature perhaps is very different. Maybe somebody sometime might want to look at perhaps the politics of literature. And when we talk about politics of literature, another story comes to my mind. The University Grants Commission had a careless list, if most of us would remember. They had a careless list which was in vogue for about 6 years. Then they scrapped it in 24. A year or a year and a half before they scrapped it, they threw out it from it. I still remember talking to Ajay on more than one occasion. And this is unfair and we must write to them. And there was a friend of Littcrit who was on the committee. I told him, why don't you talk to him? And Ajay, in his characteristic manner, he laughed. So he knew why he was laughing. I also understood why he was laughing. It remained there. But I think there are scholars, serious scholars, who know what they are doing when they send an article to the for consideration. I think that is the benchmark that the journal has always kept. And I think it's very important that we have that, we are able to sustain that and live up to the, the standards that were set by someone like Srinivas Iyengar or our own profile. It's quite a task, it's quite a challenge these days to do that. And Ajay and his team are doing exemplary work in that. It's very difficult to run a journal. But regularly, it's not that you have 3 years, nothing happening, and then you have an omnibus special edition coming up, and then you try to use that mileage to bring out 2 more issues, and then again 2-year gap. That doesn't happen. That has never happened with Littcrit. I think that's the driving force. So a big congratulations, hats off to the team. That I think is the team, the emblem of Littcrit, team of Littcrit. And I don't know if I'll be there for the 125th. Professor Prakash is very young. So I look forward, probably he'll be there for the 150th as well. But I know that this journal will survive, and I think it will be there as long as the Institute of English is also here. I'm not here doesn't mean that Palayam campus, we don't know what will happen to the department. But I think you cannot dissociate Littcrit from the Institute of English. I think the institute of relation has always been a singular presence for the journal, and I think that also must be acknowledged. So I wish the journal the very best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your warm words of appreciation and acknowledgement. It is time for the much awaited event, the release of the 100th issue of the 50-year-old Littcrit journal. I welcome Professor Uday Kumar to release the 100th edition of Littcrit by presenting the first copy to Professor E.V. Ramakrishnan. All the members of the editorial board of Littcrit are requested to come to the dais.
Thank you. Thank you, Kumar and the Littcrit team for inviting me to join this very special occasion of uh, celebrating the 100th issue of Littcrit. And many friends are here, teachers, colleagues are here, and many people have spoken about the fact that Littcrit has lived on for 5 decades is in itself a remarkable thing. And I think that is really important to remember because literary studies is a kind of disciplinary field where we have had difficulties in creating professional academic journals. Like some in history or sociology, for example, we have IESHR studies in history, contributions in sociology, which are kind of internationally known journals. Whereas when it comes to literary studies, there are very few of them, literary one. I can say this with some feeling because I was part of an effort to start a journal in Delhi University. And we had conceived it as a journal of interdisciplinary humanities because that's the nature of literary studies at that time. But it did not really take off because of some of the university changing policies at that time. Sage was prepared to publish. I feel that what Littcrit has accomplished is something which is very important and essential for a really serious, intellectually committed academic journal. That is, over these 5 years of its life so far, it has, on the one hand, reflected the changing nature of the field. When you look at the issues, various issues, you can see a progress, a transformation in the nature of the boundaries, the outer limits of that field. That is one part. The second part of it is that it has also made a kind of unique intervention in the field. Now, this is very important. This is probably even more important than reflecting the changing nature of the field. There, I feel that right from the beginning, Littcrit had it was a space for literary studies, comparative literary studies, world literary studies, theoretical studies, and at the same time, you will also find papers on theater and drama, performance creation. There is a combination of something that is uniquely local as well as cosmopolitan and international and national in the nature of the contributions. So congratulations to the Littcrit team for sustaining it and making it flourish. And Ajay Kumar rightly complained graciously that I haven't contributed an essay. That's very true. And that's only, and my slowness in writing is the only thing to blame. It's not the lack of interest. But I have played a very minor role, a tiny role in the life of literature. Not as a writer, but as a courier. I provided a courier service at one point for literature. This is the time I had completed my MA here, and I was doing an MPhil in JNU, which I didn't complete. And I got a scholarship to do my PhD in England. So before I left for England, Professor Ayyappa Panikar told me that, can you carry 2 letters to England with you when you go and get it across? And so I said, of course. And he said, Professor P.K. Rajan will actually hand them over to you. So that's how I met Professor P.K. Rajan for the first time, this extremely gentle and warm presence of P.K. Rajan. So he gave me 2 brown envelopes, which had an issue of Littcrit and a letter. And this issue I was familiar with because that carried the very well-known interview of Professor Panikar with Frederick Jameson at Yale. Professor Panikar was a fellow there during the second year of our MA. And I was thoroughly familiar with that interview even before it appeared in Littcrit because I was involved in translating it into Malayalam. And Professor Sachidanandan and I translated it and published it in a little magazine called Uttaram, which probably ran for 6 or 7 issues. They're very beautiful issues, but it did not have a lot. So I was happy to carry this, and Littcrit was planning to organize a symposium around that interview. And the letters were letters of invitation to participate in this symposium. And then I took these envelopes, and after I left Rajan's presence, I looked at the envelopes, and a kind of shiver ran through my spine because they were addressed to Professor Raymond Williams and Professor Eagleton. So I carried it to England, and Professor Raymond Williams had just retired from Jesus College, Cambridge, and Cambridge was far away. So I posted the envelope to him with the covering. Eagleton was in my university. He was at Warden College, so I sent there's something called a pigeon post where you can send notes to students and colleagues in other colleges. So I sent him a note saying that, I have been asked to carry this thing for you. So he said, come over and meet me. And I met Professor Eagleton, and he was very, very gracious and warm. And once he invited me to be part of this reading group, which I was part of for some a year and a half. And then what was really interesting was in a few months' time, Professor Eagleton actually contributed. So that appeared in Littcrit along with essays by Malini and Mihir Bhattacharya and Balamohan Tampi discussing Panikar's famous interview with James. So that is a minor courier service which I performed, and I'm so glad that I could at least play a small part in this, the history of it. And hopefully, maybe, before the 125th issue, I might play for it. Now, I said that the nature of Littcrit is primarily that of literary studies, cultural studies, etc. And I feel that it's a great good fortune that we have a scholar who is one of the most eminent comparators that we have to be present here and receive this invitation. So I was delighted that Professor E. Ramakrishnan is going to be part of the event, and his work I regard with great admiration and respect. So may I invite Professor
When I hold this issue in my hand, I feel something incredible is happening because I have held some of these earliest issues of Littcrit before I started contributing. And these were pre-internet days, pre-Xerox days. So these, in SRC, to get a Xerox copy, you have to pay 1 rupee per page. That 1 rupee with 1976. So in those days, research really demanded that you need a whole lot of legwork and footwork and breathing dust in very dusty libraries. I have undergone treatment for bronchitis several times, visiting libraries in India, because they are not all air conditioned, etc. And P.K. Rajan, Dr. P.K. Rajan's handwritten letters will come. I was applying. We met much later, and we continued our correspondence on several issues. I have actually exchanged views with him. I have very rarely met such a genuine human being, such a genuine scholar whose commitment towards this kind of research work and mentoring younger researchers was so genuine. He actually wanted this to be a forum where young scholars actually contribute and improve their prospects, but that didn't mean he will actually compromise with quality. And I have always asked my students when they had something interesting to say, read old issues of these old issues are very valuable. When some of my students were doing work on Black American fiction, I could give 5 or 6 issues of Littcrit, which carried wonderful articles. And foreign journals were not very easy in many universities or colleges, particularly colleges. And it was, I think there is by name Littcrit, Indian response to literature. I always underline that an Indian response to literature is interest in Indian aesthetics and a whole lot of issues related to the emerging disciplines of comparative literature and the studies. They all opened up new areas of research. So I remember my friend Dr. P.K. Rajan with great, I would say, memory of sense of loss, and definitely I feel journals like Littcrit, they have a very important role in Indian academy, because it is time we actually gave our response to literature, because we are a country of the 28 or 30 major literary traditions. And all these literary traditions are producing enormous quantity of writing. And translation is another issue which Littcrit has always taken up, and there have been special issues. So thank you, Professor Ajay Kumar. Thank you, Professor Lal, and the colleagues here for giving me this opportunity to speak on the occasion of its release.
aesthetic design and layout of a journal enhances its stature. Since 1988, the layout and cover design of Littcrit have been done by Godfrey's Graphics. Godfrey sir is not present here. Littcrit's website has been developed and duly maintained by Mr. Ziaul Haq. I invite Mr. Ziaul Haq to come and accept the certificate of acknowledgement and appreciation from Professor Uday Kumar. Now we will have the panel discussion. Before the panel discussion, I will give a brief introduction of the panelists. Professor Uday Kumar is a professor at the JNU Center for English Studies. Sir is a renowned critic and teacher who specializes in Joyce studies and contemporary literary and cultural studies. Sir has also taught at the University of Delhi and the Center for Studies in Social Sciences, Calcutta. Professor Uday Kumar was a visiting professor at Newcastle University and fellow at Nehru Memorial Museum and Library. He is the author of several research papers on contemporary cultural and literary theory and Indian literature. Professor E.V. Ramakrishnan is a bilingual critic who writes in Malayalam and English. He is an Indian English poet, a translator, and a distinguished teacher. Sir is a recipient of the Sahitya Academy and Kerala Sahitya Academy Awards. Author of multiple books in Malayalam and English, Sir's most recent publication is a 4-volume poetry collection, Tips for Living in an Expanding Universe. Sir has retired from the Central University of Gujarat as Professor and Dean. He is a Professor Emeritus of the University of Gujarat. Our third panelist is Dr. Jamila Begum. Ma'am has played a stellar role in popularizing Canadian studies in India. Former professor and head of the Institute of English, Dr. Jamila Begum has also edited a special issue of Littcrit on Canadian studies as a guest editor. I cordially invite the panelists to begin the discussion on the crisis of humanities.
Thank you again. When Ajay Kumar spoke to me some months ago about this panel discussion, and when he suggested the crisis of the humanities as the theme for that, I found it really intriguing because in English studies, younger people in the room may not know about this, but the time when people like I began teaching, the continuous need for discussion of the crisis in teaching. Now it seems to have kind of, because the Aboriginal would remember this period, there were conferences on the crisis in teaching. But I felt that in the case, the present case, when Ajay Kumar proposed this, there is some other kind of significance when we formulate this idea of the crisis in humanities. I try to briefly explain that, make a couple of remarks, and then pass it on to other managers. See, we know that the word crisis has a relationship to there's a very interesting connection. Like, crisis is a kind of situation which is an impossible situation. Problem is stage in the evolution of a process which is unsustainable and you do not know which way it is going. Now, the early uses of this word comes from pathology and histology. Pathology in the progress of a disease, we speak about somebody with the diseases in the crisis. This is what we call a critical condition. And so crisis and critical, in that sense, very closely connected. The interesting thing about crisis is that it's an impossible situation. Things cannot continue in that way. But we do not know when it is going to end and how it is going to change. So crisis also indicates the possibility that things are going to change in some way. In that sense, it also gestures a future which is uncertain, unlike words like progress. So when we think about the crisis of humanities, one way to think about it is that what is the status of humanities now? What kind of process of transformation is being fought in it? And what are the ways in which we can think about this necessary transformation or inevitable transformation, which is in progress now? There are many aspects of it which I'm sure others will think about, like artificial intelligence, the nature of discipline institutions that are doing it. But there is a second way in which we can think about crisis in relation to humanities. That is what I'm more interested in. I feel that humanities as a kind of intellectual space has an intrinsic relationship to crisis. Here I'm not speaking about a crisis that is happening within the field of humanities, but humanities as a space itself works by putting disciplinary protocols into crisis, establish ways of thinking into crisis, ways of reading into crisis. So this aspect of the humanities is something which I think is profoundly interesting and important. Now we know that as a kind of name for a disciplinary state, the meaning of humanities is uncertain and it's not a given about. Like if you look at the disciplines for humanities at different points in time, you get a progressively expanding. The idea of humanities goes back to the Western tradition, goes back to the Greek notion of paideia, Latin idea of humanitas. These were seen as essential for the making of an all-round individual for political parts. This is important. Now, when we come to the Middle Ages, Littcrit humaniores actually means things which are not theological. There is a kind of secular field of inquiry which is indicated by the word humanities. But the modern idea of humanities, which we work with, universities work with, you could say it goes back to the beginning of the modern university. That is 18th century, end of 18th century, etc. Where a certain idea of the human becomes important. And we know that Immanuel Kant wrote a very important book called The Conflict of the Faculties, which is really about the university and the space of what we can now call this philosophy. A space where one can also debate and discuss all the other disciplines of knowledge production and the norms which come up. Now, this may look like a great idea, but we also know that that enlightenment moment is also a kind of complicated moment, because this is also the time when the idea of the definition of the human being, of the human subject, as rational, as creative, etc., comes forward. But along with that, like its shadow, you also get the development of an idea that not all human beings are equal. This is also the beginnings of the theory of races. Kant himself wrote this book called Diversity of Human Race. His lectures on anthropology, people think of it as the beginning of the modern philosophical concept of race as related to skin color and linking it with intellectual factors. So you could say that that idea of the human subject, with which modern humanities began, is in crisis. The idea that on the one hand you have universality, on the other hand you have a set of exclusions through which you define it. Now, this critique of the idea of the human which came from humanities, I believe that is really the most creative energy which is animating the field of humanities. It has come not merely from a critique of the Enlightenment from various positions, but also from a new kind of attention to experiences of slavery, dehumanization, like Afro-American thinking has been extremely important in this, where this high idea of the human is kind of discounted in favor of a lower threshold of what is to be human. This has happened partly because of the nature, the changes which have happened in the nature of modern power, which you know that thinkers like Foucault, Agamben studied quite a lot. Where it is no longer the mind or the body of the rational subject, which is the object of the operational power, but the minimal threshold of life, which is near life, bare life, which is the point of application. So it has a relationship with all this, and in India too, we know that this is balanced because these kinds of transformations in the nature of political power, nature of governance, nature of citizenship, tourism, diversity, these are like issues around us. We are going through that thing. So there, a new kind of attention becomes possible to human subjects who are actually, to borrow Anike Javed's phrase, in a state of destitution. They're not institutionalized forms of subjectivity, but rather destitutional subjectivity. Earlier, some speakers mentioned the preoccupation in marginalization, that is studies. We need to think of this kind of attention as that. And there, it's also important to distinguish between two thrusts. One is actually the idea of elevating these marginalized subjects to the normative idea of the city. That you could call it a process of normalization. You want to make everybody into the image of the bourgeois subject. The second is the other way around. That is, you try to reduce or discount the idea of the human from the position of citizenship to this lowest threshold of experiences in a destitute state. And I think that second aspect is really what is most important in the humanities now. And critical class studies, Dalit studies, study of vernacular forms, and also in places like Kerala, where the most interesting work in what we now in English call the humanities traditionally happened outside the university. Intellectuals and scholars, I can think about P.S.P. Balakrishnan or Krishnamana or people like that, they really came from outside the university, and there is a different kind of protocol which animates their work. So in places like this, probably one of the challenges of humanities is really to address that vernacular field of intellectuality, which is a closer relationship to forms, to politics to the public space rather than to the professional confines of the professional. Now, I don't want to speak long, and the last point I want to make is a brief thing about AI, which artificial intelligence, which is many of the university teachers are taking. By the way, I retired last year, so I know of the teaching. But in the last couple of semesters, I thought that artificial intelligence generated written submissions. Because we think of ranking as an essential way of training the humanities. So if that is actually not AI is doing that, how do we do it? This created a considerable anxiety. Many of my colleagues still are facing that. I try to get rid of the submission and instead created a blog where people have to post not necessarily in an academic language of the and this is visible to everybody. So when we meet in the class, all the meetings in discussion. This is excellent. But I also feel that maybe the coming of AI will challenge some of the problematic aspects of the universe. What I mean by that is also grading, because it is one thing to test students for diagnostic purposes. That is to find out what work is being carried out, successful, what are people able to do. The second thing is to get people to evaluate and determine their value in the market outside the university. Sometimes I feel that AI probably will destroy that second aspect of reading and make the university will change. These are also important aspects of the humanities now. So I will stop there. This just to forward a few ideas.
Thank you. Uday has made things easier. So I would actually begin with somewhere is this idea that there was the idea of human in the Enlightenment context. Now that was a very important context of redefining the idea of human, humanity, etc. And in the last 300 or 200 plus years, it has actually run its course. And that has created a certain epistemological horizon in which many of these disciplines, from anthropology to maybe the digital humanities, they all have the separate kind of allotted spaces. But we are increasingly, this is what recently Amitabh Ghosh had a book called Wild Fictions. And in the preface, he says, this history, which I am mentioning, which Uday also mentioned, that actually has come to an end. That came to an end around 1960s or around that time. A certain idea of human being, a certain definition of human being which was provided by Enlightenment thought, Enlightenment ideology, has been called into question. And this, on the one hand, was definitely related to the rise of new kinds of ideas of knowledge. You see, in the early 20th century, American who talks about the idea of double consciousness. You see, one body but two identities. So already there have been questions being raised regarding this issue of human. You see, is it something which can be sort of contained by the discourse of modernity? At stake was a certain discourse of modernity and its idea of history, its idea of evolutionary time, particularly in a discipline like anthropology, you see this. A certain evolutionary time with a teleology which actually makes you more and more modern. But then this is not a modernity which is equally accessible to a whole lot of communities across the world. This division across, particularly the linear progressive idea of time, this only actually accommodates certain histories, certain experiences, certain kind of evolutions of what you call societies, but you find a large number of people have been left out of that. And this is where fundamental questions were being asked. Foucault has a very interesting distinction between, you say, I know what I do, but I do not know what my deeds do. So, as an English teacher, I often say this, I know I am teaching Shakespeare, but what is my teaching of Shakespeare in a multilingual Indian classroom in Marathwada doing, or in Surat doing to that community, to my students? These are complex questions. This is not a question Terry Eagleton has to answer. I have to answer that question for myself. And that's where theory of any, with capital T or small t, it may not come to your rescue. You need to actually negotiate a certain kind of bilinguality or trilinguality where the idea of Shakespeare can actually mean several things. When I tell my students in Surat that the very first performance of Shakespearean drama was held in Surat sometime in 1850, that was the taming of the shrew. And this was done by Parsis. This is a history no Gujarati speaking student really remembers. That's something which I bring to the class, and then we talk about how usually a few things like Parsi theatre using Shakespearean, using a kind of theme, Shakespearean drama, and Parsi theatre itself mutating to what you call Bollywood. The early Hindi films have a whole lot of things to do with if you watch Mughal Azam and films like that, they are just stages being photographed through movie camera. So you have a history, you have stake in Shakespeare, but then I reached there through several, but this is not something you can set a question in the classroom, or I can't even ask my student to write an essay on the relation between Shakespeare and Bollywood and Shakespeare, they would understand. But Shakespeare and what you call Parsi theatre, that's largely not really explored, but there was a kind of parallel development of Shakespeare in Indian languages. So we will have to, this is a way of decolonizing what is Shakespeare, the idea of Shakespeare, etc. So this will also mean crossing the boundaries of several disciplines, and not only several disciplines, several languages. You cannot actually do it with English alone. The boundaries of English need to be crossed if we have to reclaim humanities in a way which can actually be functional in the English classroom. A whole set of the texts have taught me, and my students have taught me, that when you cross the boundary, when you transgress, when you actually break the rules, they understand things better because they are used to breaking rules and they understand the need for breaking rules. And a whole lot of such, for example, issues like you see how when you teach you see Dalit autobiography in the class, or when you teach black autobiography in the class, there are many contexts which allow you to bring in their own experience, students' own experience, and sometimes the idea of human itself, the idea of human, which actually, as Uday mentioned, as a normative idea, it circulates as a normative idea, but subjectivity is always something which actually cannot be straight. So you put a stick in water, you find part of the stick bent. You see, there is a bending there. You see, so all subjectivities do not actually have the same shape in this water or liquid called language. There, I mean, they appear differently, distorted, bent, and that's where maybe other kinds of, particularly first person singular experiences, narratives, life experiences, which are outside the frame of canonical literature, they actually help you understand human with all its variation, with multiple kind of uh, differences from the normative. And here, I also have always found useful. Can you narrate what's happening in Iran? Narration becomes a certain ethical responsibility at a certain point in time. Can you narrate? How do you actually, if stories survive, if songs survive, people survive. So humanities finally is about survival and the study of narratives. And that's why law is increasingly now seen as a humanities subject. Stanley Fish is also a professor of law. He teaches law in Harvard, along with what he teaches, reading and the response theory. So how does law become a? This actually shows the nature of crisis we are, in a way, facing today. The boundaries of humanities actually needs to be extended in order to, in a way, face this larger ethical question of being human. There is the Agamben's small book called Open, and he has a chapter called Anthropological Machine, where he actually says, he discusses at length a poem by, I think, Rilke called Open, and how animals see the world, how man sees the world. This idea of open, naked, being naked in the world. Suddenly you actually have a different relationship with what is the world outside. So anthropological machine is what Agamben says our enlightenment discourse has produced a kind of binary, man and the other, man and animal. We have reserved the worst kind of abuses for the animal. Animal like, beastly. Look at all the adjectives associated with animal. And this has a history. How has a certain usage discourse has emerged? And now, how do you undo this? That is what humanities are trying to do now. You see, how do we actually recover maybe the human in the non-human world, the human in the world which actually was, you see, this is, requires enormous imagination. I think humanity, the crisis is about its very complex relation with institutions, because humanities cannot be contained by institutions, but at the same time, it has to be institutionalized. You see, so definitely a whole lot of humanities will have to be done outside the institutional space. So how do you see, do humanities ethically within the institutional space? I think increasingly as people who have been working within institution, many of you are within that space, you find we have been trying to marginally, address this question uh, by accommodating minor issues, the issues of the minor issues of, but then we haven't actually had a certain philosophical kind of the real grasp on how do we go about, in the Indian context at least, with so many kind of dehumanizing situations, where the untold kind of violence, the question of violence itself, how much of this violence actually is addressed in a classroom where the text of humanities enable us to discuss it with. So I stop here. Maybe some of them are actually disconnected, but I hope I have made some of the points which can make you think. Thank you.
Thank you to the two speakers who started off the discussion. But before I go into the discussion, I take this opportunity to pay my homage to Dr. P.K. Rajan, the founder of Littcrit, and my congratulations to the Littcrit team for bringing out the 100th volume of Littcrit. So these words, I would say, it's a moment of blessing for me to be here in this hall, a hall that has witnessed so many conferences, debates, discussions on humanities and what it is to be human. And Dr. P.K. Rajan was often part of those discussions, as also the members of the Littcrit team here today. So today, when I talk about humanities and the crisis that Uday Kumar has just put forward to you, I would like to begin my discussion with a question. Can we live without romance? Can we live without emotions? Can we live without love? Can we live without bonding? Can we live without a sense of community feel? Of course, the answer is yours. Uh, is there an ethics in it, as Amy Ramakrishnan just said? Is there a logic in it? Do we think with our hearts and feel with our brains? Isn't that what we do in any discussion? And I think that is what so many years back, Socrates, who's thought to be the wisest man on earth by the Delphic Oracle, he made a remark that one can never forget, and that is, unexamined life is not worth living. And humanities does exactly that. examines life in all its ambiguity, in all its complexity, and a literature student flies like a skylark of Shelley up into the clouds, imagines so many possibilities, uncertainties, so many silences. Even as you associate yourself with the skylark, as a literature student, when I remember Professor Panikar used to teach us Murder in the Cathedral, and he used to read in his very sonorous voice the chorus. We used to feel ourselves sort of burning in our seats, like with repulsion as to what he was trying to get across to us. That was humanities for me as a student and as a teacher much later on. I think as a teacher, because I grew up under the tutorship of Dr. Panikar for many years, starting with my MA, then my PhD, and later on working as his colleague for over 32 years. Maybe it is this feeling, even when both Sukhdev Kumar and the previous speaker was talking about the philosophy of crisis. Even when we talk about the philosophy of a crisis, we should be aware that without literacy, that is the ability to read and write, which is fast disappearing. And I was very surprised to see Uday Kumar's notes handwritten. And I wanted to ask him, do you still write? Well, writing gives you space for thought, and that is human. If you can think while you are framing your responses to whatever you might be thinking of, that is humanities. You cannot think about a life that is unexamined, as Socrates said. You examine every bit of life, whether it be with the rules that Immanuel Kant put forward in his philosophy, or John Stuart Mill talked about when he talked about the ethics of humanities and of living. We know that this constant movement of responses is part of human intellect. Identity for Stuart Hall is something that is always in the making. And I think for our conscience, for our approach to what is happening around the world, it is this stirring of our consciousness. It is the stirring of our feelings that make us think. Unless we have that to begin with, we do not have thought. That is my understanding of humanities and what is the crisis that humanities is facing now. We all have heard about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and maths. The US started off with that and said that we need only STEM education because we only need it to enhance the labor market. And we needed people with the abilities to translate the jobs that are coming up with their intellect and their thoughts in these four streets. And one fine day, the departments, I know in many of the university departments, either in UK, Germany, or in US, humanities was being given lesser and lesser funds because they thought it was not useful. Unless there is a use for your studies and unless you are made marketable or a commodity in the labor market, you are not welcome in this world. So are we moving into a world where everything is based on economy, everything is based on capital gains? And if we have that, that is enough, the world will go. But while I was thinking about this, I suddenly thought, what about all the old people who have left the job market or the labor market? What is STEM for us? Is it something very disposable? We don't need it at all because we have reached a time when a phase in humanities where more than thought, it is the meaningfulness of life that we bring to life that is more important. What about the educational system that we have now? We find that even in India, until the 10th grade, everybody wants to go for the math stream or the science stream. They want to be a doctor or anything here. It's becoming less now. At one time, we had parents lined up, sending them to the coaching classes. Slowly that is come, but it's not fully gone. It will continue. And literature and humanities was given a back seat. If you study literature, if you study history, if you study politics, if you study anthropology, sociology, these are all humanities, they are not useful. I think one of the biggest blows I got in my life during my directorship of the Canadian Studies Center was that Shastri started the Shastri Indo-Canadian Institute, saying this is going to be an organization which will be based on cultural values, on ethical values, on the give and take between Canada and India. The social sciences was promoted. Literature was promoted. There are a lot of fellowships for literature. And then by the 2000, 2010, everything began to change. IIMs and IITs became members of Shastri Indo-Canadian Institute. And then every project that was given, they said, oh, this literature project is not useful. Let us go for something that talks about how to manage waste or how to protect the environment, how to build on our finances. These were the projects that were being funded. And the big aim or objective that Lal Bahadur Shastri started with went to pieces. And even today, I know that whenever Shastri has something going on, it is always related to STEM and to the usefulness of the project that is being taken. So are we encountering in a world where humanities is slowly being thrown out, not being funded? This is something that I realized recently when I became part of a UN program on development and mobilization and empowerment of women. On behalf of the All India Women's Conference, I was the representative there. And what we all felt, it was a forum of women naturally, but what we all felt was that the government was cutting down funds, not only through the UN that reaches out to so many countries, but it was also cutting down in individual countries. And they titled it The Backlash Against Women. So for a long time, we talked about feminist movements, we talked about possibilities for gender, how gender comes into a study of English studies. All that was part of our program. And today, they say that we have no funding for women. We are cutting down, we are slashing the funding, research funding for women. This is happening not only with the UN organizations, it is happening with the universities as well. And most of you know the brighter students would choose the STEM education rather than the humanities because they think it is more value. It's here that I think we have to pause and think about why this has happened in humanities. Is this because we have kept ourselves insular from one another? Today we talk about historical literacy. We talk about cultural literacy. It's not just literacy, but something that attempts to bridge disciplines together, to bring disciplines together so that they don't stand alone. And why is this happening? This is happening because humanities wants to survive. And without humanities, you have no human in this world. If you want a human being who thinks and feels and talks and makes even silences meaningful, then you need what has just been said, the ethics of life. We need the meaning of life, and what Socrates rightly said, unexamined life is not worth living. I think I'll stop at this point and talk more about STEM and STEAM, which is another term that has just come in. STEAM is science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. So many schools now in education are trying to bring in this. But the issue here again is that the mainstream is science. This is the appendage to the mainstream. IT industries in Stanford University, there was a recent research and data collection that was done. And I was told that uh, they went to the IT or they went to the technology centers. They interviewed around 600 or 800 ITs who were working there. And then they made a data out of it. They said, those who had a humanities background and then came to IT fared better in leadership roles and in relationships with one another. And this is essential for any industry to grow. On the other hand, they said students who came just from the STEM stream, they showed lack of discipline they had, but lack of relationships, values, ethics. So this is to say that unless we are able to complement both humanities as well as science streams, and as Uday Kumar said, even artificial intelligence, it is becoming more and more an instrument that will replace the human brain, but it never can. We all know that the artificial intelligence is artificial, it is not human. It's an intelligence that has been created by the human mind. And if the human mind did not have that creativity and that critical outlook, artificial intelligence would not. Artificial intelligence would never have taken its birth. So where are we in this world with humanities? Let us, I think, save humanities by not sidelining it and making it an appendage to science studies, but making it central to the study of our civilization. Because unless we have that, we will not survive. Unless we have human intelligence, unless we have emotions, unless we are able to connect, unless we are able, as you rightly said, look at people belonging to different communities, belonging to different races, belonging to different countries on a normalized platform, human beings will not survive. And maybe that we hope will not happen. So they would. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for this comment. I just want to pick up just two things which I think are important. One is about what Professor Ramakrishnan indicated about negative. Humanities, it's very interesting thing. On the one hand, we had a proliferation of studies of narrative over the last 20 years. Many other disciplines have gone to that, like history, for example. One thing which I have found is that these studies of narrative have often led to what I would like to call a fixing of the meanings of narrative. Like, for example, even when we take up narratives of oppressed or marginalized communities, there is soon an institutional template about this.
by which you have already decided, anticipated the politics of that narration, the meanings of that narration, etc. In fact, over the last couple of decades, the main difficulty in the classroom is actually to get students to think beyond these factors. So this I think is important thing. And this in a way is connected to what the media teacher was saying about the question of emotions. Because we know that in literary texts and primarily literary narratives or autobiography narratives, things like that, we have a narrative structure to what we are reading, but there is also what you may call an emotional or an affective structure which may not be identical. Like you may read a narrative which is telling you the story in terms of the plot of something which is successful as a human project, but the way in which that narrative may impact you might be from the moments of the most difficult emotions which come up in it. Like there is what the biography, some of them, they are stories of struggle and sometimes even achievement. But the political force of these autobiographies, many of them, came from the force of the experiences, let's say, of humiliation, the stigma. Now, this is an old problem in literature, not a problem, old possibility in literature. Like what a story tells you, the story that is being told, and the work that a story performs are not identical. And I feel the real space of humanities is to see this difference, see this. So therefore, I have often felt that this is the second thing. In humanities, it's very difficult to have a template of protocols, like in the case of some social science disciplines, for instance, which model themselves on science. But when you come close to actual scientific practice of experimentation, it is sometimes less rigid, more flexible than outside science and. So, in humanities, often those protocols can be limited. These protocols can come from academic institutions, they can come from what the military indicated about agencies which fund research. It can come from state projects, like if you look at the ADP document, humanities are often associated with development goals and stages of development. They are also connected with cultural identity. These are specific goals of disciplines. But there is a dimension of humanities which is less about protocols, but about nurturing a kind of attention on the object. This attention is not about consolidating the object, but about loosening it up, making you see problems emerging out of it so that it becomes unfamiliar. That I think is a real challenge that and possibility that humanities have.
There is one issue which I would actually, I don't know how far it's really relevant, but many of you must have followed the debate between Gopal Guru and Sundar Serukai, the cracked mirror, and that has some relevance for humanities. In the question of experience was one of the issues which came up in Sundar Sarukai's essay. Gopal Guru raised this question of, to put it in his own words, theoretical Brahmins and empirical Shudras, and this division in Indian kind of situation. You see, we humanities are data. Basically, we end up as data for others to theorize. You see, this issue, you read literature, now you have historians reading literature, you have anthropologists, you have the theoreticians from many disciplines using literature, using the, and this in the process. Some of the issues which just now touched upon is the effective dimensions which really have what we call the political element. Perhaps how does it shape a narrative outside the classroom? Maybe sometimes an event. How does a text become an event? That actually happens through the intervention of a context. I've seen this happening in Maharashtra. For example, the renaming of Marathwada, a kind of agitation which went on for 10 years, and lot of violence happened during that time. And then you have the literature emerging. So when you read a certain text, that text also has it's also related to an event. Events are in the life of a community. In the life of a community, they are experiences. They have locations, and so how do you bring these things together without theorizing? Maybe sometimes literary criticism will have to narrate. There may be a kind of literary criticism which doesn't offer theoretical kind of explanations, or it may try to actually narrate, and in the nuances of narration, it can interpret. The interpretation happens through the nuances of narration. And this kind of literary criticism, maybe I have seen a few kind of many creative writers when they write. I'm not making, but when I actually read many of the creative writers have written, they don't want to be known as critics. But then, sometimes they are actually writing a narrative. Davis Ray, a very famous, lesser known Bengali novelist, he has an essay on what actually novel writing or fictional style means. So he actually says, what is the function of, it's not to tell a story with an ending. A story never ends. So many of these stories which actually do not end, they are the stories which have a space for the reader to enter. There is a space for the reader, and he can take it in different directions. So he would have theorized it and made a whole lot of, but he leaves it at some point where many possibilities are suggested. I think literary criticism need to be different. It has to reinvent itself. I don't know whether you can actually write an MPhil dissertation in this time. That we will have to wait and see. But there has to be a different accent of. And one more point. You see, how does you deal with? How do you deal with Gandhi in the classroom? I have had a situation where after 3 months of rioting in Gujarat, we are back in the classroom. I sit in the teacher's chair, and most of the students are present. And I said, I am not going to teach. If you want to say something, you say, or we will just sit in silence. I am not in a position to speak. As usual, for 15 minutes, there was absolute silence. If you were talking among themselves, then maybe in an hour, among the conversation, Gandhi's name came up. This came from the classroom. They were not saying this as an answer. They were not saying it, not even as a possibility of resolving anything. But the only name which could come up at that point in that time in an English class was Gandhi. This actually was a stunning kind of insight to me. Students did not remember Tolstoy or Dostoevsky. Students did not remember many other things. And they had different, and then of course, many had their own experiences to say. Gandhi faced violence, in his own time. We always talk about Gandhi as a apostle of ahimsa, but it takes a lot of himsa, to become an apostle of ahimsa. You see how much he was in the shadow of threat, shadow of several, but then his concern, I will give you one more example and then stop. This actually was an anecdote given by Delhi author. A family, they were trying to escape from, it was in the days of riots in 48. Gandhi was actually in Delhi, but Gandhi doesn't come into the picture. This was a desperate family fleeing Delhi, and they had some relatives in Lahore. So one train was to leave. So, and that train left, and the relatives were waiting for these 4 or 5 people. But when the train reached there, they went to every compartment, searched for these people. Every compartment had only dead bodies, but these people were not present. The dead bodies were not present. They didn't know how to contact the people back in Delhi because they had no address. They wrote a postcard to Gandhi. Gandhi, India. They didn't write even Delhi. And that postcard reached Gandhi. And the letter was, we were waiting for these relatives, the names were given. On this particular day, this train left. They were to come by that train. And they were not seen as dead or alive in the train. Could you please help? After 2 weeks, they got a reply from Gandhi saying they are alive, they are being taken care of in a refugee camp in a corner of Delhi. This is the Gandhi who actually, was remembered, a postcard, and Gandhi replies. So when we talk of ethical, when we talk of humanities, there are certain things that perhaps why Wittgenstein said the ethical actually cannot be narrative. It's the other of discourse. The ethical is the other of discourse. It cannot actually be put in the discourse.
So I just wanted to add 2 points here and things that perhaps I just wanted to add 2 points here. One is, what is the power of politics? What happens when power operates in institutions? When histories get rewritten, when narrative voices are subdued, narrative voices are squashed. On TV today, when some of those narrative voices we would like to listen to are not allowed to speak up. There was a time when we remember, if you go back in time, talking about the tribals, the Adivasis, their silences, they did not have a narrative. They did not have a story to tell. It is not that they did not have a story to tell. They did not have a voice to tell the story. So when you're talking about humanities, we are also talking about the voices that still prevail in spite of the politics. That is the one point that I want to make. And the second point that I wanted to make was all life is a storytelling. Okay, Uma just talked about autobiography and Gandhi's autobiography as well. Autobiography is selective. Autobiography, you want to tell people only what you want to share with others. So autobiography is also intentional writing. Autobiography is also uh, prescriptive writing. This is the way you read it. And then somebody says, I don't want you to read it that way. I want to do a reverse reading. This is what Maya Angelou and other black writers were talking about when they said, listen to our voices. We want to be read and understood the way we want to be understood. But what is the way to be understood? That is the enigma of all narratives. The reader is always disassociated from the writer. And the writer writes with a purpose, with an agenda, but the reader makes different senses out of it. And that depends upon the society in which you are brought up, the way in which you live. I would like to close with a very personal narrative. I have a grandson who is in the US. And once we were taking a walk in the park, and asked him, what all do you learn in your history? He is in the 8th grade. So I asked him, what all do you study in the 8th grade in history? And he said, oh, we study about Roosevelt, and we study about Franklin, and we study about all the great leaders in America, and what the white Americans have made America what is it, and what Trump is going now, make America great. But then I asked him, don't you study anything about the blacks who came to the African Americans who came to know? He didn't know absolutely at the 8th grade. He did not know absolutely anything about black Americans. And he did not even know anything about other countries. There's just 2 lines about India. There are another 2 lines about Africa. That is all the children are brought up with to understand and know what history is. Now, this is the history that politics, the power of politics, enforces upon individuals. And that is the real crisis actually in humanities. The way everything is blinded for some, and the way in which it is operated for some to believe. And we believe and grow up in a world like that. And that is a real challenge to humanities unless it opens up and it allows for a free interaction and a free understanding and a free literacy about it all. Thank you.
Thank you, esteemed panelists, for capturing the present dilemma of many teachers struggling to teach prescribed syllabus in multilingual classrooms, where there is actually no connect between the text and the context of the students in the classroom. For capturing the problem of AI-generated project submissions, and for underscoring the importance of writing and thinking in being human. Thank you very much. Now we will proceed to the next item on the agenda. Littcrit had conducted a poster design competition in connection with the release of the 100th issue of the journal. The topic of the competition was Wither Humanities. I have been reminded that you have not received an applause for the panel discussions. So we were me. So I think we can have you on the stage and carry on with the prize distribution.
If you want the audience
Exchange. Yeah.
maybe 5 minutes they should give. Not that.
Okay. Please, we can have questions. The session is open, and then we will proceed to the prize distribution.
Thank you to all the three resource persons for that very engaging and again lots of ideas to think about critically as well. My concern is regarding when it comes to humanities in crisis and the way in which we have to rethink what it means to be an intellectual or what it means to be ethical. There is this larger concern that we have as teachers in the departments when it comes to doctoral research. Basically, there is this question of what outcome does a doctoral research in humanities or in English departments bring into effect? And these days, the very popular buzzword within the university is translational research and translational science. So, and even social sciences also to a certain extent, they are ready to accept that there is a way in which social science research also contributes something to the society. So, beyond the way in which humanities departments have to reimagine themselves in order to ensure that the student community, the academia, is getting a new kind of approach towards humanities. How would we intervene in this particular domain where it's also about how we take these conversations to the society and try to be try not to limit ourselves to this very small or limited kind of groups where it is also about a translational dimension to humanities.
He says this about the setting up of the universities in modern times. And as we know, they are even with the development of modern capitalism in the 18th century, when theories of market economy ideas are coming up. And the universities, and especially as a space of humanities, this comes up as a kind of counterpoint, something which should be protected from the demands of the market. Now we know that setting up had ambivalent consequences. This also created a certain kind of isolation of the university as a space. But there is also a kind of feeling that it's only in some delay or some separation from the market that you can have the kind of inquiries that a university is meant to do. Now, in our times, I think there is a similar kind of problem which comes up because, of course, the question of the market has changed. The question of what the public sphere wants of universities has changed. So there is an immediate need for usefulness. But what we need to really look at is what exactly is usefulness. Usefulness itself has different kinds of speed. There are some things which we can immediately use, their consequences are immediate. There are some things which the use value cannot be determined so easily. And I feel that the challenge of humanities now is insisting on this expanded, non-immediate satisfaction of the demand for needs. That is, and to demonstrate that longer duration is absolutely important. Now, I do not think that this is something which can be a popular. And there I think this is also what I was trying to indicate by saying that the rejection of established templates, opening up new ways of thinking, looking at the way we feel, the way we experience. These new insights are the only things that humanities can really offer. Like said, humanities are about the non-coercive rearrangement of desire. So if there is a coercive rearrangement, then no invention is going to happen. This coercion can come not only from outside, but also from within, as this kind of a blackmail of an immediate satisfaction of a responsibility.
No, I think I will agree with what I would actually suggest that we shouldn't in any way reinforce the state-centric, even if it is put in very either nationalistic or regionalistic kind of requirement, research or inquiry of any kind that should address issues which the students or the faculty they feel they believe in, they believe in. And there is increasing kind of I wouldn't say sponsorship because sometimes there is funding, sometimes there is no funding. There is increasing kind of pressures from many quarters to abide by the unwritten, these are mostly the unwritten codes which circulate in society. And this I find is a utilitarian functional, that's one thing, but there can be ideological and that I know how in an IIT lecturer was asked to say this project was not student was pursuing a feminist kind of a research project, but even that was a committee found that was not accepted. So what do you do in context of that kind? In today's India, this question can actually maybe each area has its own problem.
This is not a question. I've been thinking about the theme of this panel ever since I got the brochure and listening to you. All the while, I was thinking of one remarkable book titled The Sense of an Ending by Frank Kermode. I thought the discussion that we had uncanny resemblance to many of the things that he had talked about 50 plus years ago. And one idea that haunts me after reading the book and after listening to you is this very idea of crisis. And I've always felt that crisis makes us human. Maybe that is what humanities is all about. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
To add to what Professor Hariharan was saying, see, there was a crisis when in humanities when you were a student. When you were a student, when Udayan was a student, when I was a student, and when our students are students. So this is a perennial crisis, which I think is also the strength of humanities. No other discipline has the kind of crisis that we have in our discipline, which also speaks about, I mean, disciplines are also, as I always tell my students, laboratories of power. You know, they actually stop anything that all boundaries have to be non-porous. But it is the porosity of the boundaries in disciplines like the humanities where we always have a counter-disciplinary logic to the disciplinarity itself, the question of disciplinarity itself, which I think is a reason for this crisis. And I think this crisis is a strength that we need to celebrate, maybe not to lament at all. So on that note, വളരുന്നോറും പിളരുകയും പിളരുന്നോറും വളരുകയും ചെയ്യുന്ന ഒരു discipline. That is what
I prescribe the sense of an ending for our students. Enjoy teaching it. It's a wonderful place.
couple narratives, I'll just make an intervention. So I live in a place called Vallika, where you have the Amadanabai ashram. And every third person in Vallika is a foreigner. And unfortunately, with my little English, when you go to a shop, immediately the shopman tells the foreigner, English professor. And I have to talk. And sometime back I was talking to an American, and I told him all the little things I knew about America, Tony Morrison and basketball and all that. And he said, how do you know? He said, damn, how do you know all this? Recently, I was speaking to an Italian, Pedro, and I asked him, what is your prime minister's name? So I said that I asked you this question because I wanted to add something that is very funny. Our prime minister's name is Modi, and your prime minister's name is Melanie. And there is this concept of melody in India. And he said, how do you know all this? And indirectly, both of them asked me, you know all this and still you want to migrate Europe and America. So my question is the humanities in a crisis because humanities is trying to teach bits and pieces to people? Since you spoke about Agamben, sir, I read a small pamphlet by Agamben on taste. Taste. I was wondering, how can you write something like this? And he ends it by connecting it to the whole concept of rasa. So I was thinking humanities should not be bits and pieces teaching. It should be more exhaustive. It should bring in many disciplines, etc., etc. And the classroom would be better. But I know all important people on the stage. So you should look at the 4-year degree program syllabi in Kerala. I'm sorry for saying this in such an august audience. But you come out of it. I won't use the word. So important people should, like you, I think, should make more interventions and add the corpus of humanities teaching and make it better. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
The real crisis lies here. Reality.
There is you know that now liberal studies has come back as part of the university, and these expensive private universities of the liberal studies programs. One thing which is interesting is that many of them begin with majors in humanities disciplines, whether it be literary studies or anthropology or history. Then in at least 3 or 4 cases, I have seen that after 10 years, they feel that the enrollment is not good enough, so the majors get formed out. So what you eventually have is this common liberal studies in the beginning. That is where the humanities appear. And there the result is exactly what you said. Like you only have a piecemeal understanding. You do not really have any kind of disciplinary training. See, to challenge discipline, you need to have some kind of disciplinary training. It's only like another chapter. You need something which actually you are challenging. You need to know what you are actually challenging. So that begins to get loose and down. This is something which is not private universities, public universities, and the major discussions all over it. So one part is precisely this kind of mixture of little bits.
Cafeteria or the basket system that we have there.
Even then, even the basket system, you can have serious courses, but if you do not have serious courses, then it becomes on the one hand the idea of the soft skill, on the other hand you have these.
So, if you're coming up literally theory, what we call historical literacy, historical understanding has completely gone out of the syllabus, and it's like history is unimportant. We are facing postgraduates in English who have absolutely no idea of literary history or cultural history. but they know a lot of theories. It comes from the academy, it comes from you.
Yeah, there, he said that when I began teaching, when I began teaching, PhD, and at that time, theory, literary theory was just coming into India. It hadn't yet become established in India. And for us, that was a major way of opening something which had just become not even new critical, but an appreciation of literary texts, which were, like if you look at PhD thesis written in English departments in the 1980s, early 80s, late 70s, so theory was a way of challenging and opening it up. And usually teaching theory was difficult because you know that these theorists who are being taught, they come with an enormous large background. So you need to have training in that and you need to teach. But what happened was very soon this was appropriated into a model which is that of theory and application. So you will find students thinking of a research topic when they are interested in one particular field, and then they would want some particular text to apply the thing. Whereas the whole purpose of theorizing was to begin with the text or literary phenomena or literary historical events, and using theory as a toolkit for unpacking it, unraveling. So this is a kind of change which happened. So without historical part, I feel that in literary studies by the 1970s, 80s, the history part is already very important. You won't find there was a course in literature. Those are very important. I still feel that course in literary history, intellectual history, these are very, very important. But they have practically disappeared. How many universities have this? So it is this larger gap that it has. And I feel that the relationship between literature departments, social sciences department, and philosophy, this is something which never really was possible. So it is that we are, and now there is another problem that is, I found that a lot of students have, maybe that's what earlier we used to say that if many people actually come to literary studies because they like reading literature, some of them are poets, you know, and but then after 3 years or 5 years of literary studies training, the creativity is totally gone. They become critics, you know, they only become critics. But similarly, there is a problem now that I often find that students, there is very little passion for reading literature. In some places, you find a passion for a simplistic understanding of theoretical ideas, sometimes even complex understanding. But the passion for encountering literary texts and seeing in them a form of thought. So that is really the challenge in the classroom now. How do we reanimate that?
Why don't we look at reading as inevitably changing? Because when the printed word came, things changed. Internet came, things changed. So why do we need to hark back on the old kind of reading where we have to read text? It's not going to happen every day.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting is that there is some kind of attention, and we like many of our students who work on campus literatures, they work on cinema, but so long as there is an attention to what you're encountering, attention to the force of what you're encountering, rather than evading it and framing it by some preconceived ideas, then we are on to something. Otherwise, we reproduce knowledge which is already been used. You won't be producing it.
Since we are running short of time and it is lunchtime, we must move on to the next item on the agenda. But before that, a round of applause. We have come to the finale of the celebrations commemorating 50 years of Littcrit's journey and the release of its 100th issue. I cordially invite Dr. Kalyani Balat, dynamic educational entrepreneur, great teacher, and associate editor of Littcrit to deliver the vote of thanks.
It's truly a privilege and also for me a deep personal moment to propose the vote of thanks on this historic occasion, the publication of the 100th issue of Littcrit, marking 50 years of an extraordinary intellectual journey. Littcrit has survived for half a century because it is not merely a journal. It is a tradition that has been kept alive by all of us. It has been cherished by many teachers, scholars, students, a tradition that started with Dr. P.K. Rajan. I have a lot of personal memories about Dr. P.K. Rajan, how he invested us with the responsibility of taking this great endeavor forward. And this is a moment of remembrance and gratitude to him. Let me also express our sincere gratitude to our distinguished panelists. Professor Uday Kumar is a leading scholar of cultural studies and intellectual history, whose work has consistently engaged with questions of morality, democracy, and public sphere. Thank you, sir, for bringing to this discussion a rare combination of theoretical clarity and political sensitivity. Professor E.V. Ramakrishnan is one of India's most respected literary critics, poets, and translators. Sir, your lifelong engagement with Indian literatures, especially your work on modern Indian poetry and comparative literary traditions, has shaped generations of readers and scholars. Your presence here today connects Littcrit to a long and rich tradition of critical inquiry in India. Thank you, sir. Professor Jamila Begum, my own teacher and research supervisor, is a committed academic whose work engages closely with language pedagogy and literary studies. Thank you, ma'am, for this grounding conversation in the lived realities of the classroom and evolving concerns of students and young scholars. Uh, our heartfelt thanks goes to the chief editor of Littcrit, Professor Ajay Kumar, the president of this function. He is the leader whom we have been following, a meticulous visionary. We often do not see the quiet and consistent labor behind every issue. It is not really the editorial board at all, but it is Sir who does it all. And we just assist him in a small way. The attention to detail, the insistence on quality, the commitment of keeping Littcrit rigorous and relevant, it all goes to him. And it is a great learning for all of us to work with him. Thank you, sir, for keeping this flame. I would like to especially acknowledge Dr. P.N. Prakash, sir, who is also there from the very beginning of Littcrit. And when we think of Littcrit, we think of Dr. P.K. Rajan sir and Dr. P.N. Prakash also, because he has been a very consistent support to Rajan sir and Littcrit forever. And when we talk about 125th or any issue, whether P.K. Rajan sir or Prakash sir are here or not, I'm sure everybody has to go, but they will forever be there with the name of Littcrit. Dr. B. Hariharan, a profound thinker, brings together literature, theory, arts, and culture in a rare confluence, and has shaped all of us young minds with his discussions and deliberations with great depth and sensitivity. Even though he has not been a big part of Littcrit, as he says, he has always been a great support and a compatriot of Littcrit, and he has enriched our work in many ways throughout the period that we've been associated with it. On a personal note, I must say that working with all these great intellectuals have been a great privilege. What sustains Littcrit is not just scholarship, but relationships of trust, respect, and shared purpose. We are very much indebted to the Institute of English and University of Kerala for this camaraderie, this continued support, and for hosting us today. As a space that has long nurtured critical thought and generations of scholars in the humanities, it is especially meaningful that Littcrit's milestone is celebrated here in the University of Kerala in the company of all the people from the Institute of English. All the endeavors of Littcrit are backed by the continuous support of hundreds of research scholars down the years, students from all our colleges and universities, and the vibrant, presence of all of them here is a matter of great pride and gratitude. Thanks to also Team Balat for the execution of many of the things associated with today's function. Let me, with profound gratitude, remember the artist Godfrey, who is not here with us today, but he is there in every single page of Littcrit, in every single issue. His creative vision has shaped and refined the visual identity of Littcrit over the years. All of us who are associated with this great endeavor are here because of our passion and because of our love for knowledge and literature and continued cultural collaborations like this. Great epitome of all this is Ziaul Haq, who has been working with this journal for quite some time now, active and making Littcrit active and accessible and relevant in the digital space with his meticulous work in the website. Their quiet, consistent contributions have played a crucial role in how Littcrit reaches and engages with its readers today. Thank you. To all our contributors and subscribers across the country and beyond, we extend our gratitude. Thank you for each and every one of you who has gathered here today. Your presence makes this milestone meaningful and reminds us that the humanities will continue to live through all these deliberations and little endeavors and discussions that I'm sure will go on and on until humanity remains on this earth. Thank you for all your collective